Hello and welcome to the Dailies. American headlines zeroed in on a Caribbean standoff after President Trump threatened to block Venezuelan oil exports and Maduro deployed naval escorts. In Europe, divisions deepened over whether to unlock frozen Russian assets for Ukraine. And in the Middle East, cautious pledges for 6 countries to join Trump's Gaza Board of Peace underscored the fragility of post-war diplomacy. We'll start in the U.S. as coverage has sharpened in tone after Venezuela's Navy began escorting vessels, portraying the move as a direct test of Trump's blockade threat. Reports stress the rising risk of military confrontation, Pentagon unease, and also fears of miscalculation at sea, while analysts warn the standoff marks a shift from economic pressure towards a potentially dangerous naval escalation. The New York Times examines the rapid escalation at sea, with Nicolas Maduro ordering naval escorts for departing vessels. The piece highlights confusion inside the U.S., indeed the U.S. government, legal ambiguity surrounding tanker seizures, and also rising fears of military confrontation. It situates the blockade threatened on Venezuelan oil tankers within Trump's broader pressure campaign, underscoring the risks of escalation, regional backlash, and also the thin line between sanctions enforcement and acts of war. In the meantime, Politico reveals in an exclusive the Trump administration's quiet outreach to U.S. oil companies about a post-Maduro return to Venezuela and the industry's firm rejection to that idea. The report highlights the disconnect between White House ambitions and market realities, noting that low oil prices, political risk, and decaying infrastructure outweigh strategic interest. The piece also underscores how economic conditions are undercutting Washington's pressure campaign, despite sanctions, a naval blockade threat, and also talks of regime change. Another story attracted attention in America was President Trump's end-of-year address, as outlets reacted skeptically, emphasizing fact checks that challenged Trump's claims on economy, immigration, and inflation. Commentaries said the speech leaned on boastful rhetoric and blame rather than offering clear policy plans. Newsweek examined the speech through a fact-checking lens, highlighting a pattern of exaggeration and falsehoods across immigration, inflation, gas prices, investment, and employment claims. The analysis also notes areas where Trump relied on real data, but the piece shows how figures were overstated or stripped of context. It situates the speech amid political pressure ahead of the midterms and underscores what was left unsaid, portraying an address heavy on rhetoric but light on accuracy. The Rob and Michelle Reiner murder case continued to draw attention, with the emergence of new information about the suspect, their son, Nick Reiner. The New York Post reviews the fragmented and troubling timeline surrounding Nick Reiner's alleged killing of his parents, highlighting key gaps that investigators are yet to explain. It focuses on explosive family disputes, also Reiner's unexplained movements overnight, as we are going to see, as well as a bloodied hotel room and his eventual arrest near USC. The piece underscores unanswered questions about motive, timing, and behavior, framing the case as a disturbing puzzle that continues to deepen public unease. The Wall Street Journal took a look at President Trump's business empire, producing an interactive Explore the Trump Empire Network diagram, providing sector breakdown in a visual manner. The piece, as you will see now, maps 268 Trump-linked entities, showing parent companies as well as subsidiaries and family control, all visually, and it underscores how most ventures ultimately funnel back to the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust. Another diagram also categorizes entities by sector, highlighting the surge in crypto ventures, about 19 entities, which the piece presents as the fastest growing and the most controversial arm of the family's expanding business empire. In an exclusive, The Washington Post reconstructs the life and mindset of Tyler Robinson, the alleged killer of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, through interviews and digital footprints. The report portrays a young man whose online gaming habits, muted politics, and ordinary friendships masked a rapid, private radicalization. The piece emphasizes the dissonance between Robinson's ordinary daily interactions and the violence he allegedly planned, raising unsettling questions about how ideological grievance, identity conflicts, and online subcultures can coexist unnoticed until catastrophe. In Europe, leaders are debating using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine, either directly or as loan collateral. The debate has intensified in the media lately as US support has slowed and Ukraine faces a looming cash crisis. Europe is now under pressure to act despite legal and financial risks. The Times reveals in an exclusive mounting transatlantic tension as Washington quietly pressures European leaders to abandon plans to seize frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine. The piece recounts Washington's behind-the-scenes effort to block European plans to seize 210 billion euros in frozen Russian assets for Ukraine. It explains that US officials warned that Europe would ultimately be forced to return the money, urging seizure would undermine peace talks and financial credibility. The Guardian, on the other hand, reviews the EU's contentious plan to use those 210 billion euros in frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine through a 90 billion euro loan. The explainer outlines the legal, financial and political risks dividing member states, especially Belgium's opposition and Russia's retaliation threats. The piece situates the debate amid Ukraine's urgent funding crisis and reduced US support, warning that failure to agree would damage EU credibility, while success would still leave major legal and reconstruction challenges unresolved. The repercussions of the Bondi Beach attack in Australia were still grabbing headlines. The Sydney Morning Herald reviews Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's announcement of a 5-point reform plan to combat hate speech, anti-Semitism and radicalization in the wake of the terror attack. The report highlights cautious support from Jewish leaders alongside sharp criticism that action came too late. The piece situates the reforms within a broader reckoning over government inaction, detailing proposed legal, educational and visa measures, while underscoring the political and moral pressure now facing Canberra to deliver lasting change. These developments come amid growing international warnings about the renewed threat posed by the Islamic State. Con Coughlin wrote in The Telegraph, arguing that the Islamic State remains a serious and underestimated threat, warning that Western governments have become dangerously distracted by conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza. The author contends that Islamic State has shifted from centralized operations to inspiring lone or small cell attacks. The piece criticizes intelligence complacency and urges renewed counter-terrorism focus, framing recent violence as evidence of strategic failure rather than isolated extremism. And we'll end in the Middle East as the Times of Israel revealed that Washington received commitments from 6 countries to join a symbolic Board of Peace as part of Washington's push to build international backing for President Trump's post-war Gaza plan. However, the exclusive also exposed deep hesitation over sending troops to an international stabilization force. The piece underscores Italy's conditional willingness to contribute contribute forces, persistent uncertainty over the ISF's mandate, and also Israeli, Arab and European doubts about Hamas disarmament. Overall, the peace portrays a diplomatic initiative gaining political buy-in, but struggling to translate it into concrete security commitments. That's it for today. Thanks for watching the Dailies, only on Al Arabiya English.